I thought the worst thing my father ever did was forget my birthday. Turns out, it was remembering my net worth. By the time he slid a check for $50,000 across his mahogany desk, he had already sold my grandmother's house and signed my name on debts I never made. He called it helping me grow up, unaware that the useless daughter he mocked owned the company securing every single one of his secrets. My name is Lila Hudson, and for 28 years, I have walked the halls of the Hudson estate like a ghost haunting her own life. The house always smells the same, a suffocating mixture of lemon oil, beeswax, and the stale, recycled air of secrets kept too long in the dark. It was nearly 10 at night when I finally parked my beat-up sedan at the edge of the circular driveway, tucking it behind the manicured hedge so it would not offend the aesthetic of the luxury SUVs parked near the portico. I was late. Being late was my role in this family, just as being perfect was Vanessa's and being powerful was my father's. I expected a lecture. I expected the heavy sigh my father, Graham Hudson, reserved specifically for my failures. I expected to walk into the study and find them waiting with disappointed faces, ready to tell me I needed to try harder, be better, be more like them. I walked up the stone steps, the key heavy in my pocket. I let myself in. The foyer was empty. The grand chandelier dimmed to a low, amber glow that cast long, distorted shadows against the silk wallpaper. Silence usually reigned here, the kind of silence that costs money, thick and insulated. But tonight, there was noise. It drifted from the library, the heavy oak double doors down the east wing. Laughter. I froze. My hand was already reaching for the hallway table to drop my keys, but I pulled it back. That laughter did not sound like family. It did not sound like the warm, chaotic joy of people who loved each other. It sounded sharp and metallic. It sounded like winners dividing up a prize after a rigged game. I moved down the hall. I knew exactly where to step to avoid the creaks in the hardwood. I had spent my childhood trying to be invisible in this house, and the muscle memory served me well now. As I neared the library, I saw the door was not fully latched. A sliver of golden light cut across the darkness of the hallway, a jagged line on the Persian rug. I recognized the voices immediately. "It is a masterstroke. Honestly," a man said. The voice was smooth, rich, and confident. Colton Reeves, my ex-boyfriend, the man who had told me 2 years ago that our lives were just going in different directions, only to end up pivoting right back into my father's inner circle as a private wealth advisor. Hearing him now, in my father's sanctuary, sent a cold spike of nausea through my stomach. "It is necessary," my father's voice boomed, though it lacked its usual courtroom thunder. It sounded tired, frayed at the edges. Graham Hudson, the great litigator, sounded like a man trying to convince himself. "We are bleeding. Colton, the appeals on the intersection case fell through this afternoon. The firm is looking at $18 million in bad judgments. If the partners find out I leveraged the operating account, I am not just disbarred, I am finished." I stood paralyzed in the dark. $18 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, like coordinates in space. "Which is why we need liquidity, and we need it by Monday," Colton replied. I could hear the clink of crystal against crystal. They were drinking the good scotch, the 25-year-old single malt Graham saved for victories. The Harbor Lighthouse sale is the only asset clean enough to move that fast without raising red flags with the auditors. The air left my lungs. Harbor Lighthouse. Grandma Maggie's cottage on the coast. It was a drafty, peeling, salt-sprayed wreck to them, but it was the only place on earth where I had ever felt like a human being and not a disappointment. Maggie had left it to me. Specifically to me, it was in a trust. "Lila will never sign it over," Vanessa's voice cut in. It was light, airy, and deadly. My sister, the surgeon, the influencer, the golden child. "She is obsessed with that dump. She thinks she's going to move there and write her little computer codes by the sea like some hermit." "She plays with computers, Van," Colton corrected with a sneer that I could practically hear. "She does not write code. She tinkers." "Whatever," Vanessa laughed, the sound like breaking glass. I pulled up the group chat with the cousins in Vermont today. Did you see what Aunt Carol posted? She called Lila the family glitch. There was a pause, and then the three of them roared with laughter. I pressed myself against the wall, my fingernails digging into my palms. The family glitch. I knew they thought little of me. I knew they found my job at the tech startup confusing and my lack of interest in high society embarrassing. But I did not know they had a name for it. I did not know they group chatted about it while I was sitting right there at Thanksgiving dinner. The glitch needs an update, Colton said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. Look, the plan is solid. We do not ask her to sell. We tell her we are doing some estate restructuring to protect her. We frame it as a trust advance. A trust advance, my father repeated, testing the words. Exactly, Colton said. I have the papers drawn up right here. We offer her $50,000, seed money, we call it. Tell her it is for her to finally start her life, get a better apartment, maybe take some classes for that hobby of hers. $50,000 cash, deposited tomorrow. All she has to do is sign the restructuring agreement. And the agreement? My father asked. Buried in Section 4, Paragraph 12, Colton explained. It transfers the title of Harborlight House to the Master Estate Holding Company, effective immediately, to be liquidated for debt coverage. But that is not the best part. Subsection B is a personal guarantee. By signing, she acknowledges joint liability for the outstanding credit lines linked to the estate. My breath hitched. They were not just stealing my house. They were pinning their debt on me. They were going to take the $18 million anchor around my father's neck and hang it around mine, all for a check for $50,000. $50,000, Vanessa mused. That is generous, Daddy, considering she would just waste it on server space or whatever she buys. She will hesitate, my father said. He sounded thoughtful, calculating. She holds on to things. She is sentimental. She is broke, Graham, Colton countered. I checked her main checking account. She has less than $4,000 liquid. She is driving a car that sounds like a lawnmower. $50,000 will look like a fortune to her. I closed my eyes. They had checked my accounts. Or rather, they had checked the decoy accounts I kept specifically for this reason. The accounts that made me look like Lila Hudson, the struggling, mediocre daughter. They had not checked the offshore holdings. They had not looked into the shell corporations. They certainly had not connected the dots to Cyphernest Dynamics. It is not about the money, my father said, and for a second, a foolish, childish part of me hoped he was about to defend me. I hoped he was about to say that he could not do this to his own daughter. Then he spoke again. It is about the approach. We have to sell it as love. We have to sell it as us finally taking her seriously. She will read the paperwork, won't she? Vanessa asked. I mean, even Lila can read. My father laughed, a dry, dismissive bark. Lila. She is simple. She is grateful by default. She has spent her whole life waiting for me to pat her on the head. If I smile at her, if I tell her I'm proud of her and I want to help her launch her future, she will not read past the first page. She never does. She will just sign it and say thank you. The hallway seemed to tilt. Grateful by default. That was it. That was the summary of my existence in his eyes. I was a dog waiting for scraps. He did not just think I was stupid. He banked on it. He was building his entire financial survival strategy on the absolute certainty of my desperation for his approval. He believed that a smile from him was worth more to me than my grandmother's legacy. He believed that he could strip me of my inheritance, saddle me with ruinous debt, and I would thank him for the privilege, because I was just that pathetic. Inside the library, the mood lightened. They moved on to discussing what they would order for late-night dinner, as if they had not just plotted the destruction of a family member. I will have the lobster bisque, Vanessa said, and make sure Lila does not see the wine list when she gets here. She would not appreciate the vintage anyway. I looked at the crack in the door one last time. I could see the edge of my father's sleeve, the expensive fabric of his suit. I could see Colton's hand resting on the desk, tapping a pen against the leather surface. I had a choice. I could kick the door open. I could scream. I could tell them that I knew about the $18 million. I could throw the vase on the hallway table and demand respect. I could tell them that the useless daughter who plays with computers had just secured a defense contract worth more than this entire estate. But my father was right about one thing. I was a listener. I paid attention. If I walked in there now, I was just Lila, the daughter, throwing a tantrum. They would gaslight me. They would say I misunderstood. They would hide the papers, find another way to ruin me, and I would lose the advantage of surprise. They thought I was simple. They thought I was a glitch. They thought I was a closed system they could hack with a fake smile and a check for $50,000. I stepped back. 1 step, 2 steps. I did not make a sound. I let the thick carpet absorb my retreat. I turned away from the library, away from the warmth that was not warmth, and walked back toward the front door. The house felt different now. It was no longer a monument to my inadequacy. It was a crime scene, and I was the witness they did not know existed. I reached the foyer. My reflection caught in the dark glass of the grandfather clock. I looked pale. My cardigan was oversized. My hair pulled back in a messy bun. I looked exactly like the girl they described. Weak, messy, easy, good. Let them keep seeing that girl. I opened the heavy front door and slipped out into the night air. It was cold, biting, but it felt clean compared to the air inside. I walked to my car, the gravel crunching softly under my sneakers. I got in, the leather seat cold against my back. I did not start the engine immediately. I sat there in the dark, staring up at the lit window of the library. I could see their silhouettes moving against the curtains. They were celebrating. They thought they had already won. They thought the game was over before I even knew I was playing. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. It was not the cracked iPhone I used around them. It was a prototype, encrypted, secure, running an operating system I had built from the kernel up. I tapped the screen. The logo of CipherNest Dynamics pulsed once a stylized hawk in mid-dive and then unlocked. I pulled up the admin console. I navigated to the external client list. There it was, buried under a third-party vendor agreement I had authorized 6 months ago to test our firewall capabilities against mid-tier law firms. Hudson Crown, LLP. Status active. Monitoring level full packet capture. My father thought I never read past the first page. He was about to learn that I read the metadata, the source code, and the deleted logs. I started the car. The engine sputtered, then caught. I did not drive toward the guest cottage where I usually stayed when I visited. I put the car in reverse and backed down the long, winding driveway. I was not going to stay and eat dinner. I was not going to sit there while they smiled at me and sharpened their knives. "You want simple." "Dad," I whispered to the empty car. "I will give you simple." I turned onto the main road, the headlights cutting through the fog. I was done being the daughter. It was time to be the CEO. I drove toward the city, toward the one place where gratitude was not a currency and silence was a weapon. I drove toward my servers. If they wanted to play games with my inheritance, I would show them exactly how the family glitch functioned when it decided to crash the system. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was the only transition I allowed myself. By the time the doors slid open into the penthouse, I had compartmentalized the hurt daughter and booted up the chief executive officer. This apartment did not exist on any lease agreement with my name on it. It was rented by a shell company layered inside a holding trust, a sterile glass box overlooking the city skyline that I used for one thing only: deep work. There were no family photos here. There was no warmth. There was only a wall of 6 4K monitors, a dedicated server rack humming in a climate-controlled closet, and a connection speed that could swallow a data center whole. I kicked off my sneakers and sat in the ergonomic chair that cost more than my father's entire wardrobe. With a single biometric scan of my palm, the screens flared to life. The logo of CipherNest Dynamics appeared a sleek, geometric hawk before dissolving into streams of live data. My father thought I played with computers. He thought I fixed printers and reset routers. He had no idea that L.J. Hudson, the founder of the most aggressive cybersecurity firm on the Eastern Seaboard, was the girl he kept at the kids' table during Thanksgiving. But the sweetest irony was not my success. It was his ignorance. 2 years ago, Hudson Crown LLP had upgraded their internal security. They were too cheap to hire a top-tier consultant, so they went with a mid-market reseller called Sentinel IT. What Graham did not know, and would never bother to check, was that Sentinel was a white-label partner for CipherNest. They were just a storefront. My infrastructure was the building, every email Graham sent, every motion he filed, and every frantic call log he deleted passed through my servers before it ever reached the outside world. I had legal, administrative access to his entire digital life, buried under a user agreement he had signed without reading. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, the rhythmic clack satisfyingly loud in the silent room. I did not need to hack him. I just needed to audit him. "Show me the liabilities," I whispered. I ran a query for my own social security number within the firm's private document repository. I expected a few hits from old tax filings when I was a dependent. The screen filled with red flags. My heart hammered against my ribs. A cold, hard rhythm. There were 18 separate hits in the last 3 years. I opened the most recent file. A loan agreement with a private equity lender known for predatory rates. There, on the signature line for contingent guarantor, was a scrawl that looked exactly like mine. It was a digital forgery, a good one. He had lifted my signature from a birthday card, or perhaps the paperwork for my college tuition, vectorized it, and pasted it onto a document that pledged my future assets against his firm's operating debt. The loan was for $2 million. "You put me on the hook," I said, my voice trembling with a rage that felt cleaner than the sadness I had felt in the hallway. "You are drowning, so you decided to use me as a life raft without even telling me I was in the water." I kept digging. I pulled up the metadata. He had used my identity to secure not just this loan, but 2 others. If Hudson Crown declared bankruptcy, the creditors would bypass him and come straight for the guarantor. They would come for me, and they would find L.J. Hudson. I switched windows, bringing up Vanessa's profile. My sister, the surgeon who somehow afforded 4 international vacations a year and a closet full of Birkin bags on a hospital salary. I cross-referenced her credit inquiries with the firm's accounts. The pattern was identical. There were 5 credit lines opened in the last 4 years, all co-signed by me. The most recent one was used to finance a luxury remodel of her kitchen. I sat back, staring at the glowing evidence of my exploitation. They were not just selling Grandma Maggie's house. They had been strip-mining my credit score for years. They treated my identity like a renewable resource they could harvest whenever they wanted something shiny. Then I found the emails. I searched the internal communications for the phrase Lila and Harbor Light. A thread popped up from 3 months ago, initiated by Vanessa. The subject line made my stomach turn. "The Lila problem. Graham, we need to time the ask carefully. If she feels too secure, she might ask questions. We need to lower her baseline confidence. Vanessa, leave it to me. I have some photos from her college phase that are unflattering. I will post them on Thursday. Let the family roast her for a bit. Activate her guilt response. By the time you sit her down, she will be desperate for any kind of positive reinforcement. Colton. Smart, keep her small. If she feels like a loser, $50,000 will feel like a winning lottery ticket. We need her grateful, not curious." I read the words again. Keep her small. It was tactical. The insults, the exclusion, the little digs at family dinners. It was not just their personality, it was a strategy. They were socially engineering their own daughter to make her easier to rob. I reached for my secure phone. I did not call the police. I dialed Elliot Crane. Elliot answered on the first ring. As the chief financial officer and lead legal strategist for CipherNest, he was the only person who knew exactly who L.J. Hudson was. "Talk to me," Elliot said. His voice was clipped, efficient. He knew I was in the war room. "It is worse than we thought," I said, my eyes scanning the loan documents. "Graham has forged my signature on commercial loans totaling $4 million. Vanessa has another $600,000 in consumer debt in my name, and they are planning to trick me into signing a restructuring agreement tomorrow that validates all of it." "If you sign that," Elliot said, his tone instantly shifting to legal crisis mode. "You are ratifying the fraud. You are accepting liability. But Lila, we have a bigger problem." "The IPO," I said. "We price in 24 hours," Elliot said. "The moment the bell rings on Monday morning, CipherNest goes public, your identity ceases to be a secret, the S-1 filing becomes public record. Every creditor your father owes money to is going to see that the glitch daughter is actually worth $3 billion. I looked at the clock on the screen. The countdown to the initial public offering was running in the corner, 23 hours and 40 minutes. "If I am tied to his debt when that happens," I said, realizing the magnitude of the trap. "They will sue you for everything," Elliot confirmed. "They will argue familial liability. They will argue that you were a silent partner. They will freeze your assets during the most critical week of your life. The stock price will tank. The board will panic. You have to sever this, Lila. You have to sever it completely, and you have to do it before the market opens on Monday." "I can't just refuse to sign," I said, thinking fast. "If I refuse, they will just keep the existing forgeries in place. I need them to sign something that supersedes the fraud. I need them to release me." "They won't release a cash cow," Elliot said. "Not if they know you have milk." "They don't know," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "That is the only advantage I have. They think I am broke. They think I am desperate for $50,000. I looked at the document Colton had drafted, the one designed to steal my house. It was a trap, yes, but a trap consists of moving parts, and if you change one gear, the machine does not catch the mouse. It breaks the hand of the person setting it. "Elliot," I said, leaning into the microphone, "I need you to draft a document." "Okay," he said, the sound of typing already audible in the background. "What are we filing, a cease and desist?" "No," I said. "I want you to take their agreement, the limited trust release, and I want you to rewrite it. Keep the cover page, keep the font, keep the offer of $50,000, but I want you to gut the interior clauses." "Go on," Elliot said. "I want a mutual financial severance and forfeiture clause," I dictated, the legal language flowing as easily as code. "I want language stating that in exchange for the $50,000 payment and the administrative handling of the Harbor Light estate, the undersigned parties, Graham and Vanessa, irrevocably waive any and all future claims to my income, my assets, my intellectual property, and any corporate entity where I hold a controlling interest." "You want to indemnify yourself against them," Elliot said, catching on. "I want more than that," I said. "I want to bury a clause that converts their current loans, the ones they took out in my name, into a secured debt that I hold. If they sign this, they are not just releasing me. They are admitting that any prior use of my name was unauthorized, and they are waiving their right to sue me for support when they realize I am rich." "That is aggressive," Elliot said. "If they read it, they will never sign it." "They won't read it," I said. "Graham said it himself. He thinks I am simple. He thinks I am grateful by default. He expects me to sign without looking, so he will not look either. He is arrogant, Elliot. He is so focused on the $50,000 he is losing that he won't look at the billions he is giving away." I watched the data streams on my monitors, the evidence of their greed, their cruelty, their absolute dismissal of my worth. They wanted to buy my future for the price of a mid-sized sedan. "Do it," I told Elliot. "Draft me something that looks like a trust release and a thank you card. Make it look like the submissive, obedient paperwork of a daughter who just wants to be helpful, and hide the part where they sign away any claim to my empire for the price of a used car." "I will have it ready in an hour," Elliot said. "Lila, are you sure you can pull this off? You have to sit there and let them insult you. You have to play the victim." I looked at my reflection in the dark monitor. The fearful girl from the hallway was gone. "I have been practicing for this role my entire life," I said. "Get the paperwork ready. I'm going to buy my freedom, and I'm going to make them think it was their idea." I hung up. The room was silent. save for the hum of the servers. I turned back to the screen, to the countdown clock. 23 hours. I had one day to engineer the greatest deception of my life. My father had taught me well. After all, he taught me that people see what they want to see, and tomorrow, he was going to see a helpless daughter, right up until the moment the trap snapped shut. The drive to Harbor Light House took 40 minutes, but it felt like traveling back 2 decades. I left the glittering, hard-edged skyline of the city behind, trading the asphalt arteries of finance for the winding, salt-slicked roads of the coast. The darkness here was different. It was not the absence of light, but the presence of the ocean. A heavy, rhythmic breathing that filled the space between the stars. When my headlights finally swept over the driveway, the cottage looked small. It sat perched on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic, a weathered thing of gray shingles and peeling white trim. To my father, this place was a distressed asset, a rotting pile of wood sitting on a valuable parcel of land. To Vanessa, it was a background for a photo she would filter until it looked rustic rather than ruined. To me, it was the only church I had ever known. I killed the engine. The silence rushed in, accompanied by the crash of waves against the rocks below. I stepped out, the sea air hitting me like a physical embrace, damp and cold, and smelling of iodine and old memories. I walked up the path, stepping over the third slat in the wooden walkway because I knew, without looking, that it was rotted through. My father had promised to fix that step for 10 years. He never did. I unlocked the front door. The hinges screamed, a sound that echoed in the empty foyer. Inside, the air was still and smelled of lavender and dust. I did not turn on the overhead lights. Instead, I walked by the moonlight filtering through the unwashed windows, navigating the clutter of a life interrupted. I found myself in the kitchen. It was a small room with linoleum that curled at the corners and a refrigerator that hummed with a rattling shutter, but my eyes went instantly to the wobbly pine table in the corner. I ran my hand over the wood, feeling the scratches and the ring stains from countless mugs of tea. Suddenly, I was 8 years old again. I could see her, Maggie Blake. She was not the grandmother of storybooks who baked cookies and knitted sweaters. She was sharp-edged, smelling of menthol cigarettes and potting soil, with eyes that saw right through the performance of being a Hudson. "Sit down, Lila," the memory of her voice whispered. I saw the ghost of the machine that used to sit here, a beige, second-hand desktop tower that sounded like a jet engine taking off. My father had thrown it out of the main house when he upgraded his office, calling it junk. Maggie had fished it out of the trash, hauled it into her trunk, and set it up right here. "What is this?" I had asked, my legs swinging under the chair. "This is a door," Maggie had told me. "Your father thinks the world is made of handshakes and country clubs. He is wrong. The world is made of information. If you know how to talk to the machine, Lila, you never have to listen to anyone else." I sat in the chair, the wood cold through my jeans. I remembered the nights we spent here. While Vanessa was at debutante balls and my father was at fundraisers, I was here, learning the syntax of logic. Maggie did not know how to code, but she knew how to learn. She bought used textbooks from the library sale, Introduction to C++. Basic algorithms, the architecture of systems. I remembered the day Graham found out. He had stormed into this kitchen, his face flushed with the kind of anger that looked like disappointment. "She should be socializing," he had barked, gesturing at me as if I were a broken appliance. "She is hunched over this screen like a goblin. It is unseemly. Mother, she needs to learn things that will help her find a husband, not a help desk job." Maggie had just lit a cigarette, her hand steady. "Graham," she had said, exhaling a plume of smoke that drifted toward the ceiling. "Girls need firewalls, not fairy tales. You are raising her to be decorative. I am raising her to be functional. Now get out of my kitchen before I tell your wife about that waitress in Savannah." I smiled in the dark, a tear slipping down my cheek. That was Maggie. She held ground. She kept secrets. And she loved me not for who I could marry, but for who I was. I opened the drawer of the table. It stuck, just as it always had. Inside, beneath a layer of expired coupons and rubber bands, I found the artifacts of that love. There were notebooks, dozens of them, cheap, spiral-bound composition books filled with my handwriting, evolving from the loopy scrawl of a child to the sharp, efficient print of a teenager. I opened one. It was full of pseudocode, logic trees, and ideas for programs I wanted to build. Tucked in the back of the drawer was a framed piece of paper. The glass was cracked. It was a screenshot, printed on a dot matrix printer, of a command line window. "Hello, Maggie. I am Lila's first program." She had framed it. She had framed it like it was a diploma from Harvard. I dug deeper, my fingers brushing against a thick manila envelope taped to the underside of the drawer. My heart skipped a beat. I had never seen this before. I peeled the tape away and pulled the envelope out. On the front, in Maggie's spidery, forceful cursive, were the words, "For when gratitude starts to sound like a threat." My breath caught in my throat. She knew. Even then, she knew. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of yellow legal pad paper and a photocopy of a legal document. I unfolded the letter first. "My dearest Lila, if you are reading this, I am gone, and your father has come for the house. I know him. He thinks he is a king, but he is just a man who spends more than he makes to buy the applause of strangers. He has tried to get me to deed this house to him 4 times in the last 5 years. He calls it consolidating assets. I call it theft. He will tell you that you owe him. He will tell you that the family needs this. He will use words like duty and gratitude until you feel like you are the villain for wanting to keep what is yours. Do not listen. Gratitude is what you give to people who are kind to you. Lila, it is not a tax you pay to people who share your DNA. This house is yours. I have structured the trust so that it bypasses the general estate. No matter what papers he waves at you, no matter what debts he claims to have, this cottage belongs to you. Do not let him trade your sanctuary for his solvency. Be the glitch in his system. Love, Grandma." I lowered the letter, my hands shaking. The anger that had been simmering in my gut since the library boiled over, hot and clarifying. He knew. My father knew the house was not his to sell. He knew Maggie had explicitly blocked him from it. The restructuring agreement he wanted me to sign tomorrow was not just a bad deal. It was a violation of his dead mother's will. He was trying to trick me into overturning her final wish because he assumed I was too stupid to understand the legal mechanism she had used to protect me. I looked at the photocopy attached to the letter. It was an amendment to the Blake Family Trust. It clearly stated that Harbor Light House was to be held in a generation-skipping trust for the sole benefit of Lila Jane Hudson, untouchable by Graham Hudson or his creditors. "You liar," I whispered to the empty room. "You absolute thief." Any hesitation I had about the trap I was setting vanished. This was not just about saving my money or my pride anymore. This was about honoring the only person who had ever handed me a sword instead of a broom. A pair of headlights swept across the kitchen window, cutting through the dark. I stiffened, instinctively reaching for the letter to hide it, before realizing it was likely Marcus. I walked to the front door and opened it. Marcus Hale stood there, his silhouette broad and reassuring against the night sky. He was dressed in dark civilian clothes, but he stood with the alert posture of the military man he used to be. He held a black folder in his hand. "Secure transport complete," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I have the document Elliot drafted." I stepped back to let him in. He wiped his feet carefully, a habit of respect that my own father lacked. Marcus looked around the dim hallway, taking in the peeling wallpaper and the dust. "This is the place?" he asked softly. "This is the place," I said. He handed me the black folder. It felt heavy, though it only contained a few sheets of paper. Inside was the limited trust release and support agreement, rewritten by Elliot to strip my family of everything they thought they were taking from me. I opened it. It looked identical to the one I had seen on my father's desk. The font was the same, the header was the same, but on page 9, the text was a landmine. Marcus watched me read, He did not look at the papers. He looked at my face. "Lila," he said. He was the only one on my staff who used my first name when we were off the clock. "I need to ask you something. As your head of security, but also as someone who cares about what happens to you." I looked up. "Ask? We are crossing the Rubicon here," he said. "The moment you sign this, and they sign this, there is no going back. You are not just stopping them. You are humiliating them. You are taking their safety net. When the truth comes out on Monday, they are going to hate you. Not the way they dismiss you now, but real, active hatred. There will be no reconciliation, no Christmas dinners, no fixing this down the road." He paused, his dark eyes searching mine. "Are you sure you want to burn the bridge while you are still standing on it?" I looked away from him, toward the stairs. I ran my hand along the banister. The wood was smooth, worn down by Maggie's hand over 50 years. I thought about the $18 million in debt. I thought about the forged signatures. I thought about the Lila problem email. I thought about Maggie's letter, warning me from the grave that my father would try to eat me alive if I let him. "Marcus," I said, my voice steady in the quiet house. "They burned the bridge years ago. They just expected me to stay on the other side and inhale the smoke." I closed the folder and held it tight against my chest. The day they used my social security number to cover their bad bets, they decided I was not family. They decided I was collateral. You do not reconcile with people who see you as a resource to be consumed. I turned back to him. "This is not vengeance," I said, "and it is not cruelty. I am finally doing what Maggie told me to do. I am building a firewall. If they get burned trying to hack through it, that is not my fault." Marcus held my gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. He understood duty. He understood protection. "Copy that," he said. "The car is ready when you are. We have a big day tomorrow." "Yes," I said, looking one last time at the kitchen where a little girl learned that she was worth more than her father's approval. "We do?" I walked out of Harborlight House, leaving the ghosts behind. I had the letter in my pocket and the weapon in my hand. My father wanted me to be grateful. I would be grateful that he had taught me exactly what kind of man he was, so I would have no regrets when I signed his destruction. The atmosphere in the penthouse had shifted. The emotional weight of Harborlight House was gone, replaced by the sterile, high-frequency hum of a war room. It was 3 a.m, but neither Elliot nor I felt the drag of sleep. We were fueled by the adrenaline of the endgame. On the conference table, 3 versions of the document were spread out like battle plans. Elliot Crane, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, was marking up the margins of the latest draft with a red pen. He looked less like a CFO and more like a surgeon preparing to sever a limb to save a body. "The preamble is perfect," Elliot said, tapping the first page. "It reads exactly like what they expect. Paternalistic, condescending, and simple. To facilitate Lila Hudson's transition into independent adulthood, it strokes his ego. It makes him feel like the benevolent patriarch cutting a check to a charity case." I picked up the document. The first 3 pages were a masterclass in camouflage. They were filled with the kind of legal fluff my father loved, paragraphs about familial support structures and goodwill gestures. It outlined the payment of $50,000 clearly, making it the star of the show. It was the shiny object designed to keep their eyes off the shadows. "Now," I said, flipping past the fluff. "Let's look at the teeth." We turned to page 9. This was where the document stopped being a surrender and started being a slaughter. Subsection 4, paragraph C. To the untrained eye, or the arrogant eye that stops reading after the money is mentioned, it looked like standard boilerplate about separating financial identities. "Read it to me again," I said, needing to hear the trap snap shut aloud. Elliot adjusted his glasses and read, his voice devoid of emotion. "The undersigned parties, Graham Hudson and Vanessa Hudson, hereby irrevocably waive, release, and forfeit any and all current and future claims, rights, or interests in the income, equity, stock allocations, dividends, or intellectual property of Lila Jane Hudson, including but not limited to any entities, holding companies, or trusts associated with the initials L.J. Hudson, regardless of valuation or jurisdiction. Regardless of valuation, I repeated. That is the key. It is ironclad, Elliot confirmed. They are signing away their right to a cut of Cipher-Nest before they even know it exists. If they try to sue for a piece of the IPO next week, this clause kills the case before it even reaches discovery. They are trading billions for $50,000. And the debt? I said, pointing to the next section. Tell me we nailed the debt conversion. This was the second landmine. My father had forged my signature to make me a guarantor on his bad loans. I could have gone to the FBI, but that would blow up the IPO and drag me into a criminal investigation. I needed a cleaner solution. I needed to weaponize his own fraud. It is right here in Section 5, Elliot said. We define the existing unauthorized use of your signature not as fraud, which would void the contract, but as an informal family loan that is now being converted into a secured promissory note held by you. I traced the lines of text. It was brilliant. By signing this, Graham was acknowledging that the millions he borrowed in my name were now a debt he owed to me. And because we added a clause about misrepresentation of collateral, I could call that debt due immediately if I could prove he lied about his assets, which I already knew he had. So, I said, a cold smile forming, he thinks he is burying his fraud. In reality, he is handing me a loaded gun and putting his fingerprints on the trigger. If he ever comes after me, I call the note due. I bankrupt the firm overnight. Legally, it is beautiful, Elliot said, capping his pen. But procedurally, we have to be careful. If he realizes what he signed later, he will claim he lost the original. He will shred his copy and say this version never existed. Duplicate originals, I said. Exactly. Elliot nodded. We require 2 fully executed originals, one for him, one for you. You walk out of that room with wet ink on your copy. Do not let it leave your hand. If he tries to say, we will mail you a copy, you walk. I turned to the wall of monitors. I had sent a digital draft of the clean version, the one without the landmines, just to bait them to Colton's email server an hour ago. I pulled up the access logs. Look at this, I said, pointing to the data visualization. I tracked the IP addresses from his firm. They opened the document at 8:45. They spent 3 minutes on page 1, 2 minutes on page 2. They scrolled past page 3 in 4 seconds. They never read the back half, Elliot said. They never read it, I confirmed. I have the server logs to prove it. If they try to claim in court that I hid the clauses or that the font was too small, I can prove they had the document for hours and simply chose not to look at it. It is willful negligence. We need one more layer of protection, Elliot said. Graham owns the judges in this county. If he sues you here, he might get a friendly judge to toss the agreement on some technicality. Arbitration, I said. Mandatory binding arbitration. In California, Elliot added, under California family law codes, it is a neutral forum. His golf buddies cannot save him in San Francisco, and we add a venue waiver so he cannot drag you back to his home turf. We added the clause. It was buried near the end, looking like standard jurisdictional text. State of California, American Arbitration Association. It was the final nail in the coffin of his influence. The door to the study opened, and Marcus walked in. He was carrying a small, hard-shell case. He set it on the table and popped the latches. Inside sat a collection of devices that looked like ordinary accessories. We need to control the narrative of the room, Marcus said. It is not enough to have the contract. We need the context. If they pressure you, if they threaten you, we need it on tape. If they say, sign this or you are homeless, that is duress. But if we have them on tape saying it, and you sign it anyway, well, it proves that you were the one under attack. He picked up a pen. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy and expensive looking. Audio recorder, Marcus said. Omnidirectional microphone. 300 hours of battery life. You put this on the desk while you are reading. It will catch a whisper from across the room. He then picked up a pair of reading glasses. I did not usually wear glasses, but for the studious, confused daughter act, they were perfect. Video, he said. 720p sensor in the bridge. It streams directly to a cloud server I have set up on a distinct loop. Even if they strip search you and smash the glasses, the footage is already gone. I picked up the glasses. They felt light. You think they will threaten me? I think Graham is desperate, Marcus said grimly. And desperate men do not ask nicely. He is going to try to break you. Lila. He is going to use every button he installed in your psyche since you were 5 years old. He wants you small. He wants you scared. The cameras are there so you do not have to be afraid of what he says. Let him dig his grave with his mouth. We will just record the shovel hitting the dirt. I looked at the document one last time. It was a masterpiece of deception. It was a Trojan horse made of paper and ink. Graham thinks this is a transaction, I said, running my finger over the signature line. He thinks he is buying a house for $50,000. Elliot looked at me, his expression serious. And what are you buying? Lila? I am buying my life back, I said. I am trading their future access to my empire for the same $50,000 they think will buy my loyalty. It is the best deal I will ever make. Then we are ready, Elliot said. I will print the final versions on watermarked bonded paper. It makes it harder to swap pages later. Do it, I said, as the printer whirred to life, spitting out the pages that would end my father's reign. I walked to the window. The city lights were beginning to fade as the sky turned a bruised purple in the east. The IPO pricing call was in 4 hours. The meeting at the estate was in 6. I had to go from a billionaire CEO back to a frightened girl in a cardigan. I had to hunch my shoulders. I had to lower my voice. I had to look at my father with big, wet eyes and ask if he was sure this was the right thing to do. I had to let him win. Right up until the moment he lost everything. One more thing, I said, turning back to the room. The check. The $50,000. What about it? Elliot asked. Make sure we cash it, I said, immediately. I want the record to show I accepted the consideration. I want that $50,000 to be the undisputed price of their betrayal, Marcus smirked. I will drive you to the bank myself. I looked at the pen Marcus had given me, the recording device. Let's go get ready, I said. I have a performance to give. We were not just designing a contract. We were designing a landmine, and my father, in his arrogance, was about to step right on the pressure plate. The notification light on my phone was pulsing a soft, innocent blue when I woke up. It was 7 in the morning. The sun was just beginning to hit the glass walls of the penthouse, turning the city below into a grid of gold and long shadows. I reached for the device, expecting an update from the Asian markets or a server status report from the night shift at CipherNest. Instead, I saw Vanessa's name. It was an Instagram tag. I sat up, the Egyptian cotton sheets pooling around my waist, and swiped the screen open. My sister had been busy. While I was designing the legal instrument of her destruction, she had been curating her feed. The photo was 10 years old. It was a grainy, unflattering shot of me at 18, taken in the basement of our old house. I was wearing an oversized gray hoodie. My hair was unwashed and pulled back with a rubber band, and I was surrounded by empty soda cans and tangles of Ethernet cables. I looked exhausted, pale, and socially malnourished. I looked exactly like the weird little sister she had spent a decade describing to her friends. The caption read, Throwback Thursday. To when my little sis thought coding in a basement was a career path. Some of us grew up and got real lives, and some of us are still figuring it out. Love you anyway. Lila. Family love sisters. Tough, love growth. I stared at the image. It was not just a photo. It was a weapon. She had posted it 3 hours before our meeting. She knew I would see it. She knew the family would see it. I scrolled down to the comments. The chorus of the Hudson social circle had already assembled. Aunt Carol. Oh, Bless her heart. Does she still have that awful car, Colton Reeves? Some people just need a little longer to launch, I guess. You are a saint for looking out for her. Van, Mrs. Gable Mother's old tennis partner. It is worrisome, isn't it? Graham and Vanessa are carrying that girl on their backs. Maybe it is time for some tough love. Cousin Mark. Still playing with computers. When will she get a real job? I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck. It was not embarrassment. It was the sharp, metallic taste of adrenaline. They were flaying me alive in the public square, painting a portrait of a leech, a failure, a burden. They were setting the stage. They wanted me to walk into that library feeling small. They wanted me to feel like a charity case, so that when they slid a check for $50,000 across the table, I would not see a bribe. I would see a lifeline. My thumb hovered over the switch account button. It would be so easy. I could switch to the verified account of L.J. Hudson. I had 300,000 followers on Twitter and a massive industry presence on LinkedIn. I could reply with a single screenshot of the CipherNest valuation. I could post a photo of the view from my penthouse with the caption, "Actually, the basement paid off. How is the debt servicing going?" Van, I could destroy her narrative in 10 seconds. The temptation was a physical ache in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to shove their condescension down their throats until they choked on it. I lowered the phone. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "Not yet." If I fought back now, they would put their guard up. They would realize I had teeth. I needed them to think I was toothless. I needed them to think I was exactly the sad, broken girl in that photograph. Silence was not weakness right now. Silence was the pause before the drop. I got out of bed and walked to the closet. It was divided into two distinct sections. On the left were the clothes of L.J. Hudson tailored Italian suits, silk blouses, structured blazers that projected authority and competence. On the right was the costume department. I reached for the costume. I pulled out a beige cardigan I had bought at a thrift store specifically for family gatherings. It was slightly pilled at the elbows and hung loosely on my frame, making me look round-shouldered and defeated. I found a pair of jeans that were a size too big and a pair of scuffed white sneakers that looked like they had walked 1,000 miles of failure. I dressed slowly, watching the transformation in the full-length mirror. I stripped away the CEO. I stripped away the confidence. I let my posture slump. I pulled my hair back into a messy, low ponytail, intentionally leaving a few strands loose to look frazzled. By the time I was finished, L.J. Hudson was gone. In her place stood Lila the disappointment, Lila the glitch. "You look pathetic," I told my reflection. "Perfect." I grabbed my bag, a canvas tote instead of my usual leather briefcase, and headed for the door. Marcus was waiting for me in the lobby. He was leaning against the wall, checking his watch. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed slightly, taking in the outfit. "Going for the just-rolled-out-of-bed look?" he asked, his voice low. "I am going for the please help me, I am drowning look," I corrected. "Is the car ready?" "It is out front," he said. "And the other suit is hanging in the back, inside the garment bag, pressed and ready for the second act." We walked out to the black SUV. The city was fully awake now, the noise of traffic and construction filling the air. It was a day of commerce, of ambition. For everyone else, it was a Friday. For me, it was Judgment Day. As we merged onto the highway leading out to the estate, my phone buzzed. It was Elliot. "Talk to me," I said, putting it on speaker. "The book is building fast. Lila." Elliot's voice crackled with static energy. "We have institutional orders coming in from every major desk in New York and London. The initial range was $18 to $21 a share. The underwriters are telling me we are going to price at 24, maybe 25. The demand is insane." $25, I repeated, doing the mental math. At $25 a share, my personal stake in CipherNest would be valued at over $2 billion. "They want to know who you are," Elliot said. "The rumors are flying. People are digging. I have had 3 journalists call my personal line asking if LJ Hudson is a collective or an AI. Once the bell rings on Monday, we cannot hold the dam anymore. You are going to be famous. Lila. You can no longer pretend to be broke or lost. I only need to be broke for 3 more hours, I said, watching the skyline recede in the rearview mirror. Just long enough to sign the papers. Make sure they sign the duplicates, Elliot reminded me, his voice sharp. And Lila, do not let them get under your skin. Vanessa's post, I saw it. It is ugly. It is bait, I said. I am not biting. I hung up. I stared out the window at the passing suburbs, the manicured lawns and the strip malls. The world looked so normal, so mundane. It was strange to think that in a few hours, my life would detonate, and the shockwave would flatten the people who raised me. I began to practice. I needed to warm up the voice. I don't want to be a burden, I said to the window. My voice sounded too strong, too assured. I tried again, pitching it higher, adding a tremor of anxiety. I really don't want to be a burden, Dad. I need a fresh start. Better, Marcus said from the driver's seat. He did not look back, but I saw his eyes in the mirror. Ada, sorry. You always apologize too much when you are around them. I am so sorry to ask, I rehearsed, hunching my shoulders forward. I know things are tight. I am so grateful you are helping me. The words tasted like ash. I am so grateful. It was the lie that would seal the trap. I had to say it with conviction. I had to look into my father's eyes, the eyes of a man who stole my identity to cover his gambling debts, and tell him I was thankful for his scraps. It made me want to vomit. Deep breaths, Marcus advised. Remember the objective. You are not begging. You are hunting. This is just camouflage. We turned off the highway and onto the winding road that led to the Hudson estate. The trees grew thicker here, old oaks and elms that cast dappled shadows on the asphalt. My stomach tightened. It was a Pavlovian response. This road meant judgment. It meant inspection. It meant I was about to be measured and found wanting. The iron gates of the estate loomed ahead. They were open, waiting to swallow me. I realized then that my hands were shaking. I clenched them into fists on my lap. I was not afraid of Graham. I was not afraid of Vanessa or Colton. I held all the cards. I had the money, the power, and the evidence. My fear was smaller and far more dangerous. I was afraid that when I walked into that library, when I smelled the old leather and the pipe tobacco, when I saw my father sitting in his high-backed chair, a part of me would still want him to love me. There is a child inside every neglected daughter who believes that if she is just good enough, if she just sacrifices enough, her father will finally look at her with pride. That child was the vulnerability. That child was the one who would hesitate, who would read the contract and feel guilty about trapping him. That child would want to save him from himself. Stop the car, I said. Marcus hit the brakes immediately. The SUV came to a halt on the gravel driveway, 50 yards from the front door. Lila, Marcus asked, turning in his seat. I closed my eyes. I visualized the little girl who used to wait by the window for her father to come home. I visualized the teenager who showed him her first coding project, only to be told to go help the maid. I visualized the woman who stood outside the library door last night and heard him call her simple. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold air of the estate. I have to kill her, I said softly. Kill who? Marcus asked, confused. The daughter, I said. The one who wants his approval. She cannot walk into that room with me. She will get us killed. I imagined building a wall around that part of myself, a firewall. I encased the need for love in a block of ice, freezing it solid. I locked it away in a dark server room and cut the power. I felt a coldness settle over me, a numbness that was armor. I opened my eyes. They were dry. They were clear. Okay, I said. I am ready. Marcus studied me for a second, then nodded. He saw the shift. The victim was gone, replaced by the predator wearing the victim's skin. He eased the car forward, the gravel crunching loudly under the tires. We pulled up to the front steps. I could see Vanessa's car parked to the side. I could see Colton's flashy sports car. I reached for the door handle. I checked my reflection in the side mirror one last time. The cardigan was frumpy. The hair was a mess. The expression was anxious and pleading. Perfect. I stepped out of the car. The wind whipped at my loose clothes. I clutched the canvas bag tighter to my chest. Channeling every ounce of insecurity I had ever felt in this place, I walked up the steps. I did not ring the bell. I still had my key. For now. Showtime, I thought. I pushed the door open and stepped into the foyer. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a held breath. They were waiting for me in the library. They were waiting to strip me bare. I headed down the hallway, my sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished floor. I was walking into my own execution, or so they thought. They had no idea I was bringing the guillotine with me. The library of the Hudson Estate was a mausoleum built to honor a man who was not yet dead. It was a room of dark walnut and oxblood leather, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with first editions that had never been cracked open. It was a prop room. My father, Graham Hudson, used it to intimidate junior partners and impress gullible clients. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk like a king on a throne, backlit by the tall windows that looked out over the gardens he could no longer afford to maintain. I stood in the doorway, clutching my canvas tote bag like a shield. I let my shoulders slump. I lowered my chin. I was 28 years old, a CEO of a billion-dollar company. But in this room, I was 12 again, waiting to be scolded for coloring outside the lines. "Come in, Lila," Graham said. He did not look up from the papers he was straightening. It was a power move he had perfected in the 90s. "Don't hover." I stepped onto the Persian rug. The air smelled of lemon polish and the stale, cold scent of unlit fireplaces. The cast was assembled exactly as I had predicted. Vanessa was draped across the leather Chesterfield sofa to my right, scrolling through her phone with a bored expression that masked a predator's focus. She wore white, a sharp contrast to the dark room, pristine and untouchable. Colton Reeves was leaning against the bookcase near the window, trying to look casual, but the tightness of his jaw gave him away. He was mentally calculating his commission on the Harbor Light sale. And then there was the technician. Ms. Doyle, a senior associate at the firm, sat in a stiff-backed chair next to Graham's desk. She looked tired. Her suit was gray, her demeanor efficient. She was here to witness the slaughter, not to participate in it. "Sit," Graham commanded, gesturing to the low chair in front of the desk. The chair was significantly lower than his. Another tactic. I sat. I placed my bag on the floor, making sure the small mesh opening of the pocket facing the desk was unobstructed. Inside, the high-fidelity recorder Marcus had given me was already rolling, capturing the ambient hum of the room. "Lila," Graham began, clasping his hands on the desk. He put on his concerned patriarch face, brows knitted. Voice dropped an octave. "We have been talking. The family. We are worried about you." I blinked, keeping my eyes wide and moist behind the reading glasses. "Worried? You are drifting," he said, shaking his head sadly. "You are nearly 30. You are driving a car that is falling apart. You are working whatever that job is, and you have no assets, no security. It keeps me up at night." Vanessa snorted softly from the couch. "It is embarrassing, Lila. That is what he means." "Vanessa, please," Graham said, holding up a hand. He turned his gaze back to me. "We want to help you launch, Lila. We want to give you the foundation you need to finally stand on your own 2 feet. So, I have made a decision. I am going to release a portion of the family trust early, specifically for you." He paused for effect. This was the moment I was supposed to gasp. $50,000, he said, pronouncing the words slowly, as if they were too large for my small mind to comprehend. "Cash, today." I let my mouth fall open slightly. I pressed my hand to my chest. $50,000, I whispered. "Dad, that is, I don't know what to say." "Say thank you," Colton muttered from the corner. "I am so grateful," I stammered, looking down at my knees. "This would change everything for me. It is a fresh start, Graham said, smiling a smile that did not reach his eyes. But we need to tidy up the estate to make it happen. Standard procedure. Ms. Doyle. Ms. Doyle leaned forward and slid a thick stack of documents across the mahogany surface. The paper whispered against the wood. This is a limited trust release and support agreement, Ms. Doyle said, her voice dry and professional. It authorizes the transfer of the funds to your personal account. It also includes some standard recapitalization language regarding the broader estate assets, specifically the Harbor Light property, to ensure we can manage the family's tax liabilities. I reached for the papers. My hand trembled a calculated affectation. This was the moment of truth. This document was the one I had emailed to Colton's assistant yesterday morning, disguised as the final formatted version from their own server. I had trusted in their laziness, in the arrogance that assumed I was too stupid to alter a legal text. If they had read past page 3, they would have seen the landmines. I prayed they had not read past page 3. I flipped the cover page, page 2. There it was, in bold text, payment of $50,000. It says it right here, I said, pointing to the number like a child. 50,000. Yes, Lila, Graham said impatiently. It is all there. I turned the page. I pretended to read, my eyes scanning the dense paragraphs. I saw the headings they thought were trapping me: asset consolidation, Harbor Lighthouse transfer. They believed these clauses stripped me of my grandmother's cottage. They did not know that the definitions section on page 9 redefined transfer as a secured collateralization in my favor. I lingered on page 3, then page 4. You don't need to parse every word, Lila, Vanessa called out. It is standard legalese. God, you are so slow. I looked up, catching Graham's eye. It mentions Harbor Lighthouse. Is the house safe? Grandma wanted me to have it. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Safe? Vanessa laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. Lila, you can't even afford to heat that place. The property taxes alone are more than you make in a year. This arrangement is the only way to prevent the bank from taking it. Taking it? I asked, putting fear into my voice. Foreclosure, Graham said. He leaned forward, his shadow falling over me. The estate is under pressure. Lila, significant pressure. If we do not restructure these assets today, right now, Harbor Lighthouse will be seized by the creditors. It will be sold at auction for pennies. Is that what you want? Do you want strangers living in Mother's house because you were too stubborn to sign a piece of paper? I felt a flash of cold rage. I had checked the county records this morning. Harbor Lighthouse was free and clear. The taxes were paid. The pressure was entirely his own gambling debts and the firm's malpractice liabilities. He was lying to my face, using my love for Maggie as a weapon to coerce me. No, I whispered, shrinking back into the chair. I don't want that. Then sign, Graham said. His voice was hard now. The benevolent father mask had slipped. Sign the papers, take the check, and let the adults handle the finances, or walk out of here with nothing, and watch the cottage go into foreclosure next month. Those are your options. The recorder in my bag was catching every word. Sign or get nothing. Foreclosure. It was textbook duress. It was fraud. I looked at Ms. Doyle. She was staring at her hands, clearly uncomfortable with the bullying, but unwilling to intervene. I want to save the house, I said, and I really need the money. Then we are in agreement, Graham said, uncapping a heavy gold fountain pen and holding it out to me. I reached for the pen, but then I stopped. I pulled my hand back. I need a copy, I said softly. For Grandma's file. I keep a file of everything about her. Graham rolled his eyes. We can mail you a copy. Lila? No, I said, finding a stubborn note in my voice that was characteristic of my younger self. I want to take it with me. Please, Dad, it is important to me. Graham sighed, an explosive exhale of irritation. He looked at Ms. Doyle. Make her a copy. Actually, Mr. Hudson, Miss Doyle said, her professional training kicking in. If she is taking a copy immediately, it should be a duplicate original, For the enforceability of the release, we need 2 fully executed sets, one for the firm's records and one for the beneficiary. My heart soared. Thank you, Ms. Doyle. You just handed me the murder weapon. Fine, Graham snapped. Do we have 2 sets? Yes, Ms. Doyle said, reaching into her briefcase and pulling out a second, identical stack of papers. I always bring duplicates. She placed the second stack next to the first. Sign them both, Graham ordered. And be quick about it. I have a tea time at 1. I leaned over the desk. I picked up the pen. It was heavy, warm from his hand. I signed the first document. Lila J. Hudson. I moved to the second document. The silence in the room was punctuated only by the scratching of the nib against the paper. This is really for the best, Lila, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Maybe this will finally teach you gratitude. We are literally saving you from yourself. Maybe this will finally teach you gratitude. I mentally bookmarked that timestamp on the recording. I signed the last page. I dated it. Ms. Doyle took the documents. She notarized my signature efficiently, stamping both copies with the heavy thud of the seal. Then she slid 1 stack to Graham and 1 stack back to me. Graham, you need to sign as the grantor, she said. My father barely looked at the page. He flipped to the back, scrawled his signature violently across the line, and shoved the papers aside. He did the same with my copy. There, he said. Done. He opened the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a checkbook. He wrote out a check for $50,000, ripped it out, and slid it across the desk. It landed on top of my executed contract. Take it, he said. And Lila, don't waste it on another computer. Buy some decent clothes. I picked up the check. I picked up the contract, the limited trust release and support agreement that now legally bound him to forfeit all claims to my future wealth and acknowledged a debt he could never repay. I held the papers to my chest. I stood up. Thank you, Dad, I said. The words were true. I thanked him for being exactly the monster I needed him to be. You have no idea what this means to me. I think I do, Graham said, already turning his attention to Colton. Now, if you will excuse us, we have real business to discuss. Of course, I said. I backed out of the room. I caught Vanessa's eye. She smirked and raised her phone, snapping a photo of me clutching the check. Smile, sis, she said. You're finally worth something. I didn't smile. I just nodded and turned away. I walked out of the library, my sneakers silent on the rug. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the sheer, intoxicating rush of victory. They had signed, they had mocked, they had threatened, and they had recorded it all. I reached the foyer and opened the heavy front door. The fresh air hit me. I walked down the steps to the waiting car. Marcus was standing by the rear door, his face impassive. Done, he asked quietly as I approached. I held up the folder containing the executed original. The ink was still wet. Done, I said. They signed everything, even page 9. Marcus opened the door. Then let's get you out of those clothes. You have a stock price to watch. I slid into the back seat of the SUV. As the door closed, sealing me in the quiet safety of the car, I looked back at the house one last time. The library window was dark. They were probably pouring champagne, toasting to the sale of a house they no longer owned, paid for with money they would never see. I looked at the check in my hand. $50,000. I would frame it. I would hang it in my office at Cyphernest, right next to the IPO announcement. It was the cheapest price anyone had ever paid for a soul, and the most expensive mistake Graham Hudson had ever made. The hallway floor felt unsteady beneath my feet, or perhaps it was just the sudden shift in gravity. I walked away from the library with the canvas bag pressed against my side, my fingers white-knuckled around the strap. I had done it. I had actually done it. The document inside was not just paper, it was a severance of the soul. I felt lightheaded, a strange, buzzing mixture of adrenaline and the hollow ache that comes from amputating a limb you always knew was gangrenous, but had hoped to save. I did not look back. I knew if I turned around, I would see the closed doors of the library, the physical barrier between the daughter they thought they owned and the woman who had just bought her freedom. I pushed through the heavy front doors and descended the stone steps. The wind had picked up, stripping the last of the autumn leaves from the oaks lining the drive. Marcus was waiting by the SUV, the rear door already open. He did not ask how it went. He saw the folder in my hand and the set of my jaw, and that was enough. As soon as the door clicked shut, sealing out the estate and its suffocating silence, the transformation began. "We have 40 minutes until the bell," Marcus said, glancing at the dashboard clock. It was 8:50 in the morning. I reached for the garment bag hanging in the back. My movements were sharp, urgent. I stripped off the pilled beige cardigan that smelled of mothballs and humiliation. I kicked off the scuffed sneakers. I pulled the oversized jeans down, leaving them in a heap on the floor mat like a shed skin. In their place, I stepped into the armor of L.J. Hudson. The suit was a tailored black wool crepe by a designer whose name my sister could not pronounce. It fit like a second skin, sharp at the shoulders and nipped at the waist. I buttoned the silk blouse, the cool fabric grounding me. Marcus handed me a small velvet box from the passenger seat. I opened it to reveal a vintage tank watch with a leather strap understated, precise, and worth more than the car I had driven to the estate. I fastened it around my wrist. The weight of it was a reminder time was no longer something I wasted waiting for permission. It was something I controlled. My phone vibrated against the leather seat. I picked it up. It was a secure message from Elliot. "Pricing finalized. We are opening at $24. Demand is oversubscribed by 12 times. The underwriters are fighting for allocation. Get to the war room." "Step on it, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping the tremulous, high-pitched register I had used in the library. This was my real voice, low, certain. "We are going to be late for my coronation." The drive to the city was a blur of highway dividers and gray sky. We did not go to the penthouse. For today, we needed neutral ground, a place where the energy was raw and kinetic. We pulled up to a nondescript industrial building in the financial district, a co-working space that Elliot had rented out entirely for the day. Inside, the air was electric. The main conference room had been converted into a command center. A dozen analysts from the underwriting bank were huddled over laptops, shouting orders into headsets. But my eyes went to the main wall, where 3 massive screens were projecting the live feed from the NASDAQ market site. "There she is," Elliot shouted over the din. He looked frantic and exhilarated, his tie loosened, a coffee cup in one hand and a tablet in the other. "The founder enters the building." I walked to the center of the room. The screens showed the chaotic floor of the exchange. The countdown clock in the corner read 5 minutes to open. "What is the final book?" I asked, throwing my bag onto a table. "It is a monster," Elliot said, grinning. "We priced at the top of the range, $24 a share. That values the company at $3.8 billion out of the gate, but the pre-market orders are stacking up. They are looking for an opening trade closer to 30. I stared at the ticker symbol waiting in the queue. CNDX. It was real. The code I had written in my grandmother's kitchen. The sleepless nights in server rooms. The years of hiding behind a gender-neutral pseudonym. It all culminated in these 4 letters. "And the paperwork?" I asked, my voice quiet, amidst the shouting. "The duplicate original is in the safe," Marcus said, patting the steel case he had carried in. "The recording is uploaded to 3 redundant cloud servers." "Good," I said. "1 minute," a trader yelled from the corner. The room fell silent. On the giant screen, the camera panned to the podium where the opening bell ceremony was taking place. Usually, the founder would be there, clapping and smiling. I had declined. I chose to be a ghost for 1 more hour. The bell rang, a harsh electronic peal that signaled the start of the trading day. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The market was digesting the orders. Then, the ticker flashed. CNDX 28.50. A cheer went up in the room, but I held up a hand. "Wait." The number flickered. CNDX 29.10, CNDX 30, CNDX 31.25. It is popping, Elliot yelled. We are crossing $31, Lila. Look at the volume. I watched the numbers climb. Green arrows, green percentages. It was a vertical line. $32. $33. I did the math in my head. I owned 60% of the outstanding shares. At $33 a share, my net worth was hovering around $2 billion. $2 billion. I looked down at my hands. They were the same hands that had signed a check for $50,000 less than an hour ago. They were the same hands my father had called useless. You missed out, Dad, I whispered to the screen. You missed out on everything. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The clause I had buried in the agreement, the mutual financial severance, was now active. It was legally binding. At the exact moment, Graham Hudson was likely bragging to his partners about swindling me out of a cottage. He was legally barred from touching a single cent of a multi-billion-dollar fortune. Elliot, I said, not taking my eyes off the ticker. What is the market cap? $4.2 billion, Elliot replied, his voice breathless. You are officially one of the richest self-made women in the country, and nobody knows it is you yet. As if on cue, the center screen switched to a financial news network. The banner at the bottom of the screen read, CipherNest soars in debut, mystery founder. L.J. Hudson remains elusive. The anchors were speculating. We know very little about L.J. Hudson, a blonde woman said. There are rumors it is a pseudonym for a group of ex-NSA cryptographers. Others say it is a recluse living in Silicon Valley. But whoever they are, they just made a fortune this morning. My phone buzzed again. I looked down, expecting another update from the bank. It was a text from Graham. Don't be late for the garden party. 2:00 p.m. Sharp. Wear something nice for once. You need to say thank you to your sister and me in front of the guests. It is the least you can do. I stared at the message. Say thank you. He wanted me to kiss the ring. He wanted to parade me around his social circle as the charity case he had saved, the wayward daughter he had generously supported with a small trust advance. He wanted the applause for his benevolence. A cold, dark laugh bubbled up in my throat. Elliot, I said, turning away from the screens, the narrative is about to change. What do you mean? Elliot asked, looking up from his tablet. My father just texted, I said. He wants me at the estate for a garden party. He wants me to publicly thank him for the $50,000. Elliot winced. Lila, be careful. Once your name is out, once they connect Lila Hudson to L.J. Hudson, they are going to panic. They will realize what they signed. They will come for blood. They will sue. They will try to claim you defrauded them by not disclosing the IPO. Let them sue, I said. The agreement waives their right to claim non-disclosure. They signed a waiver of all future assets regardless of valuation. But you are right. They will try to spin this. They will try to say, I tricked them. I walked over to the window. The city looked different from here. It looked like a board game. I am not going to hide, I said. I am going to escalate. How? Elliot asked. I want you to file the updated S1 with the SEC immediately, I instructed. Update the founder's bio, no more initials, Lila Jane Hudson, make it official. And then I want you to print a bound copy of that filing, I said. And I want you to come to the garden party. Me? Elliot asked, surprised. Yes, you are my CFO, you are my legal counsel, and today, you are my herald. I turned back to him, my mind racing, moving pieces into position. Graham lives for his audience. He needs to look powerful in front of his peers. So, we are going to give him an audience. I picked up my phone. I am going to make 2 calls. I want a reporter there, not a gossip columnist, a real business journalist. Someone from the Journal or the Times. Do we have a contact who owes us a favor? I know Sarah Jenkins at the Financial Daily, Elliot said. She has been dying for an exclusive on CipherNest. If I tell her she gets the scoop on the founder's identity, she will be there in 20 minutes. Get her, I said. Tell her to come as a guest, a friend of a friend. Tell her to bring her recording app. And the second call, Marcus asked from the doorway. The State Bar Association, I said. The Ethics Committee. Elliot's eyes widened. Lila, that is nuclear. Graham is the head of the local chapter, I said. He prides himself on his ethical standing. I want someone there who understands the gravity of what he did. I want a witness who knows that forging a client's signature, even a daughter's, is not just a family squabble. It is disbarment. I can get David Thorne, Marcus said. He used to be a JAG officer with me. He is on the oversight committee now. He hates Graham Hudson. He thinks your father is a dinosaur who bends the rules. Invite him, I said. Tell him there is a story breaking at the Hudson estate that will interest the committee. Tell him he might want to see the documentation regarding the misuse of client collateral. I looked back at the screen. CNDX was trading at $35. The wealth was abstract, just numbers on a screen. But the power it represented was very real. This party isn't going to be a celebration, I said, buttoning my blazer. It is going to be a trial. Graham wants a show, I will give him a show, but the jury is going to be the very people he has spent his entire life trying to impress. You are going to walk in there and blow it all up, Elliot said, a mixture of fear and admiration in his voice. No, I said, checking my reflection in the dark glass of the monitor. The woman staring back was sharp, dangerous, and completely done with being grateful. I am going to walk in there and turn on the lights. If the house is dirty, that is not my fault. I grabbed my bag, the leather one this time. Get the filings, Elliot. Get the journalist. Get the ethics committee. I am going to the estate. It is time to say thank you to my father. The ticker flashed one more time before I left the room. CNDX, 3600. The price of my freedom was going up by the second, and the cost of my father's betrayal was about to become incalculable. The transformation of the Hudson estate lawn was a testament to my father's ability to spend money he did not have on people he did not like. White linen tents peaked like meringue against the afternoon sky. A string quartet, positioned beneath the weeping willow, sawed through a sedated version of Vivaldi. Waiters in white jackets navigated the crush of guests with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that cost more per bite than the hourly wage of the people serving them. It was grotesque. It was perfect. I stood by the tall hedge that separated the rose garden from the main lawn. A ghost in a black suit. I had parked the SUV around the back, away from the valet line, and entered through the servants' gate. I wanted to watch the play before I stepped onto the stage. The air smelled of expensive perfume and desperate networking. This was Graham Hudson's ecosystem. He moved through the crowd like a shark in a koi pond, his hand resting paternally on shoulders, his laugh booming just loud enough to be heard by the next group over. I tuned into his performance. He was holding court near the ice sculpture, a ridiculous swan that was already beginning to sweat in the afternoon sun. It is never easy, Graham was saying to a cluster of partners from rival firms. He swirled his scotch, looking pained. You raise them. You give them every opportunity. But sometimes you have to make the hard choices, for their own good. Is she doing any better? Asked a man I recognized as a superior court judge. Graham sighed, a masterful exhale of long-suffering fatherhood. We are hopeful. I had to make a difficult decision this afternoon, a financial intervention. Really, I released some capital to help her get on her feet, but I had to structure it carefully. Lila, well, she is not like Vanessa. She needs guardrails. It breaks my heart. But we have to force her to grow up. I took a sip of the sparkling water I had lifted from a passing tray. Guardrails. He called stealing a house and forging signatures guardrails. The audacity was almost admirable. I shifted my gaze to the patio. Vanessa was there, finding her light. She had her phone mounted on a small gimbal. Ring light attached, broadcasting to her 60,000 followers. She was doing her confessional, face head tilted, eyes soft, voice lowered to a confidential murmur. I moved closer, staying in her peripheral blind spot. Hey guys, Vanessa was saying to the screen. Sorry I have been quiet today. It has been a really emotional morning. We had to have a family meeting about my sister. I don't want to go into details because I respect her privacy, even if she makes it hard sometimes. But let's just say we had to rescue her from a really bad situation. It is exhausting being the strong one. But that is what family does. We write the checks. We clean up the messes. She paused to read a comment, her face twisting into a sad smile. Thanks. User Brian. Yeah, gratitude would be nice, but we are not holding our breath. We just want her to be safe. Anyway, look at these hydrangeas Daddy went all out. I checked my watch. It was 2:15. The guests were buzzing. But not about Graham's benevolence or Vanessa's martyrdom. They were talking about money. Two men in bespoke suits were standing near me, oblivious to my presence. Did you see the close one asked? Insane, the other replied, checking his phone. CipherNest Dynamics. It opened at $24 and closed at $96. The valuation is astronomical. It is the biggest tech IPO since Facebook. Who is the founder? The first man asked. L.J. Hudson. Is that a local guy? The name sounds familiar. Nobody knows, the second man said. The S1 filing was redacted until the bell rang. Rumor is it is some kid from Stanford, or maybe a defector from the NSA. Whoever it is, they are worth about $4 billion as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. I smiled into my glass. $4 billion. They were standing 3 feet from the founder they were discussing. They looked right through me. To them, I was just Lila, the background noise in the Hudson Symphony. I was the cautionary tale Graham used to make himself look noble. Then I saw Elliot. He walked through the main archway, looking sharp in a navy suit that was far too modern for this crowd. He spotted me immediately but kept his distance, playing the role we had rehearsed. Graham intercepted him near the bar. I watched the interaction. Graham's body language was dismissive. He shook Elliot's hand loosely, barely making eye contact. Everyone, Graham announced to the small circle around him. This is Elliot Crane. He is one of those hedge fund tech guys. I let him handle the portfolio scraps. The group chuckled. Elliot smiled, a shark showing teeth. Actually, Graham, Elliot said, his voice carrying clearly. I am in corporate governance now. CFO work mostly. Fascinating, Graham said, clearly bored. Well, mingle. Try the shrimp. He turned his back on the man who currently managed the wealth of a billionaire. I caught Elliot's eye. He gave a microscopic nod. The trap was set. Behind Elliot, 2 other figures had entered the garden. Sarah Jenkins, the lead tech reporter for the Financial Daily, looked like she was attending a funeral, dressed in severe charcoal. She was tapping furiously on her phone. Next to her was David Thorne from the Bar Association's Ethics Committee. He looked like he was attending an execution. David was staring at Graham with a look of clinical fascination. He had the digital file I had sent him an hour ago, the loan documents with the forged signatures, the logs showing the misuse of client funds, and the limited trust release that attempted to validate the fraud. They began to circulate. I watched Sarah corner a judge, asking innocent questions about Graham's reputation for creative estate planning. I watched David Thorne compliment Ms. Doyle, who looked like she wanted to vanish, and ask her specifically about the firm's notarization protocols. The invisible knives were out. At 2:30, Graham clinked a silver spoon against a crystal champagne flute. The sound cut through the chatter. A hush fell over the lawn. If I could have everyone's attention, Graham bellowed. Stepping up onto the small gazebo stage, he adjusted his tie, basking in the attention. Thank you all for coming. I know it is short notice, but today is a special day for the Hudson family. Vanessa moved to the front of the crowd, phone raised high to capture the moment for her live stream. We live in a world that moves fast, Graham pontificated. Markets rise and fall, but family is the bedrock. And sometimes, leading a family means making sure every member, even the weakest among us, is supported. He gestured vaguely toward the back of the crowd, looking for me. Lila, he called out. Where are you, sweetheart? The crowd turned. I stepped away from the hedge. I did not hunch. I did not look at the ground. I walked into the sunlight, my black suit absorbing the glare, my face calm. "I am here, Dad," I said. My voice was steady. "There she is," Graham said, beaming with condescending pride. "My youngest. Today, Lila took a big step. She accepted a helping hand. She allowed us to restructure her situation so she can finally have a fresh start. Lila, I want you to know that your sister and I are proud of you for finally accepting help instead of running from responsibility." He raised his glass. "To family. And to gratitude." "To gratitude," the crowd murmured, raising their glasses. And then, the sound began. It started as a single chirp, then a vibrate, then a ping. It was the sound of 100 push notifications hitting 100 phones simultaneously. The market had closed. The financial news apps were pushing the breaking story of the day. I saw a man in the front row frown and pull his phone out of his pocket. His eyes widened. He nudged the woman next to him. She looked at her phone. Her jaw dropped. "Oh my God," someone whispered. Graham, oblivious, was still holding his glass up, waiting for the applause that was not coming. "What is it?" Graham asked, sensing the shift in the room. "Is it the market? Did the Fed announce rates?" Vanessa's phone, still streaming, started to make a frantic, continuous pinging sound. The chat on her screen was scrolling so fast it was a blur. "What is going on?" Vanessa muttered, looking at her screen. I saw the color drain from her face. The comments were exploding. User 99. "Is that Lila Tech Bro? Wait, your sister is L.J. Hudson Cash King. Dude, check the news. The founder of CipherNest is a woman named Lila Hudson, Gossip Girl. She is worth $4 billion, and you gave her 50 grand LMAO. Vanessa looked up at me. Her eyes were huge, filled with a dawn of horror that was exquisite to behold. A murmur ripped through the crowd. It wasn't polite conversation anymore. It was shock. "It is her," the judge said, holding up his phone. The screen displayed a breaking news banner. It featured a photo of me, the one from the conference 3 years ago where I spoke on encryption protocols, the one I had kept buried until today. The headline read, "Unmasked CipherNest founder revealed as Lila J. Hudson, tech's newest billionaire." Graham lowered his glass. He looked at the crowd, confused. What are you talking about?" Sarah Jenkins, the reporter, stepped forward. She held her phone up like a weapon. "Mr. Hudson," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Are you aware that your daughter, whom you just claimed to be supporting, is the majority shareholder of CipherNest Dynamics, which closed trading today with a market capitalization of $4.2 billion. Graham blinked. He looked at me. He looked at the reporter. He looked back at me. "That is impossible," he sputtered. "Lila. She fixes computers." "She secures the global banking infrastructure," Elliot Crane said. Stepping up beside me, he held a thick, bound document in his hands. "I am Elliot Crane, CFO of CipherNest. I can confirm that Lila Jane Hudson is the founder and CEO, and as of the closing bell, she is the wealthiest person in this zip code, by a factor of 10. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Graham's face went purple. "Lila, is this true?" I took a step forward. I walked past Vanessa, who was staring at her phone as if it were a bomb. I walked up the steps of the gazebo until I was standing eye to level with my father. "It is true, Dad," I said. "But," he stammered, his brain trying to reconcile the narrative he had built with the reality standing in front of him. "But you took the money. You signed the agreement. You said you needed it." "I did need it," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the stunned audience. "I needed to know exactly how much my future was worth to you." I looked out at the crowd. I saw the ethics committee member taking notes. I saw the socialites gaping. "You told everyone you made a hard choice today," I said to Graham. "You did. You chose to trick your daughter into signing away her grandmother's house for $50,000. You chose to forge my signature on $4 million of debt. And you chose to have me sign a document that waives your right to any of this. I gestured to myself, to the suit, to the power that radiated off me. You wanted gratitude. Dad, I asked. You should be grateful I let you sign that release, because now, when the creditors come for you, they can't touch me. Vanessa's live stream was still running. I looked directly into the lens. Hey guys, I said to her 60,000 followers. Thanks for the tough love. It really paid off. The chaos that erupted was not the polite murmur of a garden party. It was the roar of an empire collapsing in real time. And I stood in the center of it, untouched, watching my father realize that the simple, grateful daughter he thought he owned had just bought the bank he owed. The polite murmur of the garden party did not just swell, it fractured. The sound was no longer the gentle hum of social climbers exchanging pleasantries. It was the sharp, jagged noise of a crowd realizing they were witnessing a public execution disguised as a toast. To my left, near the Champagne Tower, a junior associate from a rival firm had pulled a portable projector from his bag, likely brought for a pitch meeting, and beamed the image from his phone onto the white canvas of the catering tent. The image was massive, distorted slightly by the ripples in the fabric, but the text was unmistakable. It was the broadcast feed from the financial news network. There was my face. Not the Lila they knew, not the girl in the cardigan, not the glitch, but Lila J. Hudson, staring out from the screen with the cold, hard gaze of a titan. The headline beneath me was in bold red L. J. Hudson, founder and CEO, shatters market expectations. The caption scrolling beneath the chyron read, net worth estimated at $4.2 billion following historic IPO. Graham stood on the gazebo steps, his champagne glass still raised, his smile frozen in a rictus of confusion. He looked at the screen. He looked at me. He looked at the crowd. I could see the gears in his mind grinding, slipping, and then, desperately, catching on the only strategy he knew: appropriation. He laughed. It was a booming, theatrical sound that echoed painfully in the sudden silence. Well, Graham shouted, spreading his arms wide as if to embrace the chaos. The secret is out. I told you she was special. He stepped toward me, his hand reaching for my shoulder, his face arranging itself into a mask of proud, knowing fatherhood. I knew we couldn't keep it under wraps forever, Graham beamed, addressing the crowd while his fingers dug into the fabric of my suit jacket. This is what I was alluding to. Everyone. The hard choices. The guidance. It takes a steady hand to raise a genius. Doesn't it? I have been advising Lila on her portfolio for years. It was my distinct honor to help steer this ship from the shadows. He squeezed my shoulder. A warning grip meant to silence me. We make a hell of a team, don't we? Sweetheart, Cyphernest is a Hudson family triumph. The crowd wavered. They were confused, looking for a narrative that made sense. Graham Hudson was a powerful man. It was plausible that he was the puppet master behind his daughter's success. I saw heads nodding. I saw the narrative shifting back to him. I did not pull away violently. That would have looked petulant. Instead, I stepped sideways, a fluid, deliberate movement that left his hand grasping at empty air. I reached for the microphone stand that had been set up for the string quartet. I pulled the mic free. The feedback whined for a split second, a sharp, piercing sound that made everyone wince and look at me. Actually, Dad, I said, my voice amplified, clear and cool as liquid nitrogen. That is not entirely accurate. Graham's smile twitched. Lila, now is not the time for modesty. I agree, I said. It is time for accuracy. I turned to the side of the stage. Elliot, if you would. Elliot Crane stepped up the stairs. He did not look like a hedge fund scrap handler now. He looked like the CFO of a Fortune 500 company. He stood beside me, adjusting his cuffs, radiating a professional menace that matched my own. This is Elliot Crane, I announced to the crowd. He is the Chief Financial Officer of Cyphernest Dynamics. Elliot, for the sake of clarity, could you please confirm the ownership structure of the company for our guests? Elliot leaned into the mic. Certainly. Ms. Hudson. As per the S-1 filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission this morning, Lila Jane Hudson is the sole founder and majority shareholder, retaining 60% of the common stock. The remaining equity is held by institutional investors and employee pools. And the family allocation, I asked, looking directly at Graham. There is no family allocation, Elliot said, his voice flat. 0 shares were allocated to Graham Hudson, Vanessa Hudson, or any trusts associated with the Hudson estate. The company was founded, funded, and built entirely independently of the Hudson family assets. The gasp from the crowd was audible. Graham's face flushed a deep, unhealthy red. He stepped closer to me, abandoning the microphone. His voice a hiss meant only for me, though the front row could certainly hear him. "What are you doing?" he snarled. "We have a deal. You signed the papers. You took the money. Friends and family shares are standard. Lila, don't play games with me." "There must be an oversight." "There is no oversight. Graham," I said, dropping the dad entirely. "And you are right. We do have a deal. We signed the papers." I reached into my leather bag. I did not pull out a weapon, though the effect was the same. I pulled out the black folder. "Do you remember what we signed in the library 3 hours ago?" I asked, holding the folder up so the light caught the heavy, cream-colored paper. "The trust release," Graham snapped, trying to grab the folder. "The support agreement, it was for your benefit." "It was a limited trust release and support agreement," I corrected. "Or at least, that is what you called it when you told me to sign it or watch Grandma's house go into foreclosure." I opened the folder. The sound of the stiff paper turning was crisp in the silence. "Page 1 outlines the payment," I said, my voice projecting to the back of the lawn. $50,000. I received that check. I cashed it. "So we are done," Graham said, looking at the crowd, trying to laugh it off. "She took the money. Business is business." "But then there is page 9, I said. I turned the pages slowly. 1, 2, 3. I watched the blood drain from Graham's face as he realized he had never actually looked at page 9. He had stopped reading at the money. "Subsection 4, paragraph C," I announced. "The mutual financial severance and forfeiture clause." I looked at Vanessa. She was standing 10 feet away, her phone still raised, her mouth slightly open. "Vanessa," I said, "you might want to get this in close up." I began to read. I did not read with emotion. I read with the cadence of a judge passing a sentence. "In exchange for the consideration of $50,000 and the administrative handling of the Harbor Light estate, the undersigned parties Graham Hudson and Vanessa Hudson hereby irrevocably waive, release, and forfeit any and all current and future claims, rights, or interests in the income, equity, stock allocations, dividends, or intellectual property of Lila Jane Hudson." I paused. The silence was absolute. Even the wind seemed to have died down to listen. "Including," I continued, emphasizing every syllable, "but not limited to, any entities, holding companies, or trusts associated with the initials L.J. Hudson, regardless of valuation or jurisdiction." I lowered the paper. "Regardless of valuation," I repeated. "That means the $4 billion you just saw on the screen, you signed away your right to touch a single penny of it. You traded it for $50,000. "No," Graham whispered. It was a sound of pure horror. "That is not what it said." "It is exactly what it said," I replied. "You just didn't read it. You were too busy telling me I was simple. You were too busy bragging that I never read past the first page." I turned to Vanessa. "And you?" "Vanessa. You co-signed. You waived your claim too." Vanessa's hand went limp. Her phone slipped from her fingers. It hit the wooden floor of the gazebo with a clatter. Landing screen up. I glanced down. The live stream was still running. The chat was scrolling so fast it was a blur of neon text. Her viewers were watching her face collapse in real time, witnessing the exact moment her arrogance turned into ruin. "You tricked us!" Graham shouted, his voice cracking. He lunged for me. It was a clumsy, desperate movement. A man trying to claw back reality with his bare hands. "Give me that. It is a fraud. You committed fraud." I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply held the document out of his reach. "Ms. Doyle," I called out. Graham froze. He looked around wildly. "Ms." Doyle was standing near the shrimp cocktail, looking like she wished the earth would open up and swallow her whole. "Ms. Doyle, could you come up here, please?" I asked politely. The attorney walked through the parted crowd. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin white line. She ascended the stairs. She knew what was coming. She knew that David Thorne from the Ethics Committee was watching her every move. I handed her the document. "Ms. Doyle," I said, "you notarized this document 3 hours ago. You witnessed the signatures. You represent Graham Hudson and Crown LLP. Is this the valid, executed original?" Ms. Doyle took the papers. Her hands were shaking. She looked at Graham, who was staring at her with a mixture of pleading and threat. Then she looked at David Thorne, who raised a single eyebrow. She had a choice. She could lie and lose her license, her career, and likely go to jail. Or she could tell the truth and destroy her boss. Ms. Doyle looked down at the page. She adjusted her glasses. "This is the document," she said, her voice trembling but audible. "The signatures are genuine. The notarization is valid." "And the clause?" I asked mercilessly. "Is it enforceable?" Ms. Doyle closed her eyes for a brief second. "The language is standard severance boilerplate, formatted correctly. It was signed voluntarily by all parties. It is enforceable." "Thank you," I said. I took the folder back. "You heard her, Graham," I said, turning back to my father. "It is valid. You signed it. You sold my inheritance. You sold my future. And in exchange, you bought yourself out of my life." "You can't do this," Graham wheezed. He looked smaller now, his expensive suit hanging on him like a costume. "Lila, please. The firm. The debts. If I don't have access to capital." "You have $18 million in bad judgments," I said, loudly enough for the partners in the crowd to hear. "I know. I saw the books. And now, everyone else knows too." I motioned to Sarah Jenkins, the reporter. She was holding her phone up, recording every second of his disintegration. "You wanted to teach me a lesson about the real world, Dad," I said, stepping closer to him so that only he could see the cold fire in my eyes. "You wanted me to grow up. Well, I grew up. I learned to read the fine print, and I learned that gratitude is expensive." I turned my back on him. It was the ultimate dismissal. I walked to the edge of the gazebo, looking out at the sea of stunned faces, the people who had mocked me, the people who had laughed at Vanessa's posts, the people who had dismissed me as the glitch. They weren't laughing now. They were looking at me with fear. "Enjoy the party," I said into the microphone. "I believe the champagne is paid for, though, knowing my father's finances, you might want to drink it quickly." I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy, final thud. I walked down the stairs, past Ms. Doyle, who was staring at her shoes, past Vanessa, who was sobbing silently, while her phone continued to broadcast her misery to the world. I walked through the crowd, which parted for me like the Red Sea. I did not look back at the stage. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening. I could hear the murmur rising again, but this time, it wasn't gossip. It was the sound of rats scurrying off a sinking ship. The silence that followed Ms. Doyle's admission was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and filled with the invisible weight of consequences finally arriving at the doorstep. The wind rustled the white canvas of the tents, snapping the fabric like a whip. But no one moved. They were all watching the king bleed. I stood at the bottom of the gazebo stairs, the black folder held loosely at my side. I did not need to shout anymore. The truth had its own volume, from the periphery of the stunned crowd. David Thorne stepped forward. He moved with the quiet, terrifying efficiency of a man who knows the rulebook better than the person who broke it. He did not look at the guests. He walked straight to Graham, who was gripping the railing of the gazebo as if the wood were the only thing keeping him upright. David reached into his breast pocket and produced a small, cream-colored card. He held it out. Graham stared at it, his hands shaking too violently to take it, so David simply placed it on the railing. "Graham," David said. His voice was low, but in the vacuum of the garden, it carried like a gunshot. "The Ethics Committee has received a digital packet regarding your current standing. The allegations of forged cosigners and the misuse of client collateral are deeply concerning. I suggest you clear your calendar for Monday morning. We will be reviewing your license to practice." Graham's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The threat of disbarment was a language he understood perfectly. It was the death of his identity, before he could recover. Sarah Jenkins stepped into the space David had vacated. She did not offer a card. She offered a question. "Ms. Hudson?" she said, turning to me. She held her phone up, the recording app still running, capturing the sweat beading on my father's forehead. "For the article running in tomorrow's Financial Daily, I would like to ask permission to quote a specific phrase." "Which phrase?" I asked, meeting her gaze. "You should be grateful," Sarah said. She looked at Graham, her eyes cold. "I understand that was the ultimatum given to you in the library today. Sign or get nothing. I think it makes a fitting headline for a story about financial abuse, entitlement, and the collapse of a legacy." Graham flinched as if she had slapped him. "You can't print that," he croaked. "It is a private family matter. It became a public matter the moment you forged my signature on a commercial loan." "Dad," I said. A frantic movement to my right drew my attention. Vanessa had finally recovered from her paralysis. She scrambled toward me, her heels sinking into the soft grass, ruining her pristine shoes. Her face was a mask of running mascara and desperation. "Lila, stop!" she hissed, grabbing my arm. Her grip was wet and clammy. "You are destroying the family. Do you have any idea what you are doing, the sponsors, my followers? You are humiliating us." I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. I did not shake it off. I just looked at it until she let go. "I am not doing anything, Vanessa," I said calmly. "I am just reading the contract you signed." "We can fix this," she pleaded, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "It is just a misunderstanding, right? We can call the lawyers. We can tear it up. Look, you are rich now, like crazy rich. We can share. I can help you manage the image. We can be a power team. Just call it off. Tell them it was a joke." "Share." I repeated the word, tasting the absurdity of it. "You want to share the wealth you tried to steal." "We were trying to save the house," she cried, pointing toward the mansion behind us. "We did it for Harbor Light, to save Grandma's house from the bank." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "That is the funniest part," I said. "You never had to save Harbor Light House. The bank was never going to take it." Graham looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "The note was due. The foreclosure notice came last week." "I know," I said. "I saw it in the system. And do you know who bought the debt note from the bank 3 days ago?" I paused, letting the question hang in the air. "A holding company called Red-Tailed Hawk LLC," I said. "Does that sound familiar?" "It is a subsidiary of Cyphernest. I bought the debt. Dad, I own the mortgage. The bank was never going to foreclose because I was the bank." Graham staggered back. "Did you buy it?" "I bought it to keep it safe from you," I said. "So this entire charade, the threats in the library, the $50,000, it was all for nothing. You tried to use a house I already effectively owned as leverage to steal a fortune you didn't know I had. Harbor Light was never yours to sell." The realization hit him, the futility of his scheme, the absolute thoroughness of my defense. It broke something in him, but it did not make him humble. It made him dangerous. "Inside," Graham growled. He lurched down the stairs, grabbing my wrist with a strength born of pure adrenaline. "My office. Now." "Mr. Hudson," David Thorne stepped forward, but I held up a hand. "It is okay," I said to David. I have one last thing to say to him. I let him drag me. I let him pull me through the parting crowd, up the terrace steps, and into the house. He moved with the manic energy of a trapped animal. We passed the servants, who pressed themselves against the walls, eyes wide. He threw the heavy oak door of his office open and shoved me inside. He slammed the door shut and locked it. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed in the room where he had played king for so long. Graham turned on me. His face was unrecognizable. The polished litigator was gone. In his place was a terrified, furious old man. "You ungrateful little witch!" he screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "I gave you life. I gave you a name, and you come into my house, in front of my friends, in front of the bar committee, and you gut me." "You gutted yourself, Graham," I said. Leaning against his desk, I crossed my arms. "I just turned on the lights." "I will sue you," he ranted, pacing the room. "I will tie you up in court for 20 years. I will say you hacked the firm. I will say you stole trade secrets. I will go to the press and tell them you are mentally unstable. I will destroy your reputation before your stock even settles." He stopped, breathing heavily, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "No daughter would do this," he whispered. "No daughter would humiliate her father this way. You owe me, Lila. You owe me for every meal, every roof over your head. You are going to go back out there, and you are going to tell them it was a prank. You are going to sign a new agreement, or so help me God. I will ruin you." I looked at him. I looked at the veins bulging in his neck. I felt absolutely nothing. The fear I had felt this morning, the little girl who wanted his approval, she was dead. "Are you finished?" I asked. "I am just getting started," he spat. "Good," I said, "because I want you to listen to something." I pulled my phone from my pocket. I tapped the screen. I connected via Bluetooth to the high-end sound system Graham had installed in the bookshelves to impress clients with classical music. I hit play. The room filled with the sound of static, and then, crystal clear, his voice from 3 hours ago. "Sign now and get the money, or walk away with nothing and watch the cottage go into foreclosure." Graham froze. Then Vanessa's voice cut in, sharp and cruel. "Maybe this will finally teach you gratitude." Then Colton. "Subsection B is a personal guarantee. By signing, she acknowledges joint liability for the outstanding credit lines." And finally, Graham again. "She is simple. She is grateful by default. She never reads past the first page." I let it play until the part where he admitted to using my name as a collateral line item. Then I hit pause. The silence in the office was heavier than the grave. "That is a recording from a device I had in my bag," I said softly. "It is also backed up on 3 different cloud servers. My security team has a copy. My lawyer has a copy." I stepped away from the desk. "You mentioned suing me," I said. "You mentioned smearing me. If you file a single motion, if you speak my name to a reporter, if you so much as tweet about me, this audio goes to the district attorney, it goes to the creditors, it goes to the Bar Association." Graham sank into his chair. He looked small. He looked defeated. "This is fraud, Dad," I said. "Admitting to using a client's identity, your own daughter's, to secure loans without consent. That is 5 to 10 years in federal prison, and given your age, that is a life sentence." He put his head in his hands. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear," I said. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. They were tears of self-pity, but they were wet, nonetheless. "I offer you terms," I said. "You stay out of my life. You never use my name, my image, or my social security number again. You do not touch Harbor Lighthouse. I will send movers for Maggie's things. And then I am changing the locks. You retire from the firm. You step down from the Bar Association quietly." "And if I do," he whispered, "if you do," I said, "I will not press criminal charges. I will let your downfall be financial and reputational. You will lose the house. You will lose the firm. You will lose your standing. But you will not go to jail. You will get to live out your days in a small condo somewhere, living off whatever is left after the creditors pick the carcass clean." "Lila," he pleaded, "I am your father." "No," I said. "You are a debtor, and I am the one holding the note." The door handle rattled. Someone knocked firmly. "Lila." Marcus's voice came through the oak. "We are leaving." I walked to the door. I unlocked it. Marcus stood there, filling the frame. He looked at Graham, who was slumped over his desk, broken. Marcus did not say a word. He just nodded to me. He wasn't muscle. He was a witness. He was proof that I was no longer the unprotected kid at the dinner table. I had a team. I had a company. I had power that did not require Graham Hudson's permission. "Goodbye, Graham," I said. I walked out of the office. I walked down the hall, past the portraits of ancestors who would have been ashamed of the man sitting in that chair. I walked out onto the terrace. The garden party was dissolving. The guests were huddled in small groups, whispering, their eyes following me as I passed. The music had stopped. The champagne was warm. The empire Graham had built to display his dominance was collapsing in the very arena he had constructed for it. I did not stop to talk to anyone. I did not look for Vanessa. I walked straight to the black SUV waiting on the gravel drive. Marcus opened the door. I got in. "Where to?" he asked. "Home," I said. "The real one." It was late that night when I stood in front of the glass doors of Cyphernest headquarters. The city was asleep, but the building was alive, humming with the invisible energy of data and commerce. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my keychain. There were 2 keys on the ring. One was a sleek digital fob that granted me access to the secure servers of a billion-dollar company. The other was an old, tarnished brass key with a piece of masking tape on the head that read, "Harbor Light." They clinked together the past and the future, finally existing in the same space. I realized then that I wasn't angry anymore. The rage had burned itself out in the garden, leaving behind a clean, quiet clarity. My father had been right about one thing. I should be grateful. I was grateful. I was grateful that his neglect had forced me to find my own worth. I was grateful that his cruelty had taught me to build armor. I was grateful that his greed had underestimated me so profoundly that he handed me the keys to my own freedom. I unlocked the glass doors and stepped into the lobby. The night shift security guard looked up from his desk. He stood, straightening his uniform. "Good evening, Ms. Hudson," he said with genuine respect. "Good evening, Carl," I said. I walked toward the elevators, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I was Lila Jane Hudson. I was the glitch that crashed the system. And for the first time in 28 years, I didn't owe anyone a damn thing. Thank you so much for listening to Lila's story and walking this road of vengeance with me. If you enjoyed seeing the family glitch take down the system, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love hearing from our community all over the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people who need a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply owning your power.